During this tutorial, we'll cover the essential steps towards double-blind transcription and transcript validation. So Phon has a system that enables us to record 2 blind transcriptions for a given transcript, and as a means to bring these blind transcriptions into the research project, we also have an interface for transcript validation, which consists of mapping one or the other of the blind transcriptions into the transcript and add detail to it whenever needed. So it goes as follows. What we'll do is go to our new project that we created in the context of other tutorials, and in that new project I created a session that is fully segmented in that we get to know what the child and his father's utterances are, and we have an orthographic transcription for all of the utterances. So to go in the blind transcription, so if we were to go into this session without clicking on the blind transcription here, then we would be entering the transcriptions manually into the IP tiers. But here, to do the blind transcription, so what I'll do is first go in as a person I will call transcriber 1, and then I'll do a few transcriptions, and then I'll go out, I'll go out of the session and then re-enter the session as transcriber 2, so that as to create 2 blind transcriptions. And you'll be able to appreciate how the interface works from that perspective. And once we have a few transcriptions done under both transcriber names, what we'll do is go in transcript validation to see how all of these transcriptions eventually make it to the data set. So we go in the blind mode and then click on the session for the double-blind transcription. And here what you see is a window because there has been no transcribers entered yet in that particular file. So I will call myself transcriber 1, and my username will be T1. And we could use passwords, but we don't have to. So depending on how the level of detail or data protection you want to have for the data. In most cases, we don't need to use passwords, but the ability to do that is built into Phon. So, and then you go in the session, and here what I've done is I've configured an interface that it would be one of my favorite interfaces for data transcription because it gives me access to the recorded media through timeline. It also gives me access to my IPA tiers that I want to transcribe, and finally access to the IPA dictionary, which is useful in this particular case because the research was done on French. So there's a dictionary built into Phon for that. And what we'll do is we'll only transcribe the words for the child. And there are 2 ways to go about it. The first one is to enter the IPA target form and actual form. But the target form is only useful in the context of, if you are using a non-generic form for the target. But when it comes to the child's productions, to compare the child's production to a given target, typically what people will do is use the form generated from the dictionary. So one of the possibilities there, because we have a dictionary built in, is we can set the IPA target and then listen to what the child said. Okay, and then transcribe according to what we heard. And we can transcribe from scratch, so something like which has a bit of length on the vowel, and then balin. Here you go. Now you're done this one record, you can move to the next record for the child. Here the child said
deux moss.
Deux moss. And as we saw in the tutorial for phonetic transcription, the dictionary for French is missing the word moss, so we need to enter the target there manually. It can't be generated by the dictionary, but here we won't be concerned by the IP target. We will simply type up the IP actual, deux moss, and we can listen to it again.
Deux moss.
E was a little bit long, so we'll give it a bit of duration. And now we can continue, and we have trois cochons, and here comes a trick. So I've entered the two first transcriptions fully completely, but another way to proceed, and this is why I primarily display the dictionary, is that you could use the dictionary to get the target form effectively mapped in the IPA actual, and from there only modify that actual transcription to what the kid actually said as you're perceiving it. So if we listen to that here, that would be a perfect production, trois cochons. But if we play the segment,
Trois cochons.
we have trois with a more front A, and toson with a T here. And the sh is produced as an S, and now I'll pay attention to the nasal vowel at the end.
Trois cochons.
Toson. That sounds like a nasal vowel to me. So if you use the IPA lookup to the extent it's available for the language you're transcribing, then you can save time here, because all I did is, as we saw in the tutorial on phonetic transcription, if you transcribe by modification, then you save a bit of time. So imagining now that we've done the whole corpus here, we can save our work, and we're still working as transcriber 1, and close the session. And if we were to get out of the blind mode and go into Phon again, we would not see the IP actual that we transcribed, because at that point the transcription is blind, saved under transcriber 1. So let's do a second transcription here. We're doing a double blind transcription. So let's go back in blind mode, and opening the session here, we could go as existing transcriber to expand our transcription set, but this time around what we'll do is go as transcriber 2. So I'll call my name transcriber 2, and I'll call myself T2 in my username for short, and go in my transcription. And here what you'll see is that there's no transcription available for anything, because transcriber 2 is effectively starting from a blank slate. So what you can do here is start the work again, either by entering everything manually or by entering your transcription using the modification method. So I will do the modification method for this particular case, and I'm only concerned with the IP actuals. I'm generating the form, and then I can listen to what the child said.
Ballen.
It's very cute vowel. Ballen.
Ballen.
And I could see that the B is a little bit devoiced, so I will add that little detail to my transcription, which will be useful later to exemplify how we go about reconciling the transcriptions. So moving on and sticking to the transcription by modification, which in this case is kind of hard to do because the dictionary is missing that form. So, but if I play back,
Deux mois.
the deux mois, and here I will add M, us. It's a very, very clear production. And now on to the next record, trois cochons, and I'll set my target again in the actual for modification.
Trois cochons.
Trois tossons, and here I'm paying a bit of attention to the vowel, and that's about what the child produced. And for sake of exemplification, I'll pretend that in this case I did not perceive the nasality on the final vowel, and I'll save my records and close my session. So at this stage we have the first 3 records for the child are transcribed in the IP actual, but again here if we were to go in the normal mode, go into the Phon session, we would not see anything there. So if we're projecting ourselves in time, imagine both transcriber 1 and 2 have completed their transcriptions. At that stage, we still don't have anything to work with in Phon because the transcriptions are still blind. So what Phon has is an interface to reconcile the blind transcriptions and validate one candidate transcription out of it so that that transcription gets used for research. And the validation interface is part of the view menu like any other function within the session editor. And just for sake of exemplification, I'll generate my view right over the IPA lookup. So I go in IPA validation. And here for the first record, I don't have a candidate production because no one transcribed the adult. So moving to the second record, now what we can see in the validation window is that one speaker, one transcriber transcribed une baleine for the IP target. That was a small mistake of mine, but we could set the transcription there. What matters is for the actual, and the actual we see two transcriptions that are mostly the same, except for the fact that transcriber 2 perceived a little bit of devoicing on the B sound. So one option there is to obviously pay attention to that detail. So play back the segment. Okay, and here I'm perceiving the devoicing, so I will select that form and set it as part of my IPA actual for this form. And bingo. So what we have at that point is we've validated the IPA target, which was not necessary for that step, but mostly what we've done is we've produced an IPA actual out of the two choices there, and further verification of the audio signal. Then we came up with a transcription that will then be used for research. If we move up to the next record, what we have here is, well, in this particular case there was no IP target transcribed, but the record already contains in the official tiers all of the IP target forms anyway, so we don't need to worry about those. But if we look at the IP actual, here we have deux mos with a very long E here versus deux mos that has no long vowel. Again, here we can listen.
Deux mos.
Okay, and I'm perceiving the vowel as long or semi-long. So what I can do is select that form, set it. But because the other transcriber did not perceive that length, and upon listening to it another time,
Deux mos.
I could decide that maybe the reality is somewhere in between, so that I could replace that long diacritic by a half-long diacritic. And and that would be a way to reach a compromise between the two transcriptions. But here is not the goal. The idea is not to reach a compromise, but to really learn from the attention that both transcribers have put onto that form, and from there map the one that closest match your perception, and then further refine it from there.